Time to take a breath. Time to growl. Growl. Time to smile. Time to be sad. Time to innovate and be creative is my response in the extreme conditions that we're going into that have been happening for a long time and unfolding as in coming to a peak, I would say, from my view of a historical perspective, in the November 5th election in the United States. A new presidency, a new direction is happening. Many critics out there, you're probably hearing some of that news or you're avoiding some of that news, whatever the case may be. This talk today by me will really be on a smorgasbord of several kinds of response means, ideas, projections, predictions, and a whole lot of other things that I would love to share with you. For those who want to listen and want to pass this on, do so. I have also a video that I did a couple years, obviously 4 years ago, pretty much almost, on dehypnosis of the election of 2016 in America and the effect that that had when Donald Trump was elected president, defeating the woman candidate at that time. Forgot her name in the moment, but it's what's important is we have gone through these changes, and I'm not going to give a talk here from a typical lefty, liberal, progressive view. At the same time, I'm not going to give a talk that's against progressive, liberal, or left view of the way the world ought to be, right? Isn't that why we're all here? We're all here speaking and expressing more or less, when I say here in the world, to say how we think the world should be. There's not a child 1 year old who is not out there in some way expressing the way the world ought to be. And they're not afraid to express it until they get shut down emotionally, and then they'll stop expressing it. They're not scared, you may notice, this is a theme for today, of quizzing adults. What's that? What's that? And then you get an answer, and the child goes, but why? But why? Why is the sky blue? As an educator, as a virologist, as a futurist, as a critical thinker, as an integralist, attempting to build the most radical sense of wholeness that we can as we enter into the future and where we're going. Bring on the light, bring on the darkness, I say. Bring it all on because it is all already on. We are facing a time with our children. And again, no matter what your political orientation, ideological orientation is, we are facing a time of entering a very different domain after this election. It's not because of Donald Trump's victory. It's because it's a cusp of a whole set of impulses and powerful motivations that's pushing us all to change radically. Now, you may not want to think that. You may not want to think that politics has much to do with your life, and that's fine. But just tune in a little bit, hang in with me a little bit, and let's see where this goes. So, this is my first video after November 5th that I've done on my YouTube channel. I have done another talk on another channel, Integral Stage, with Layman Pascal. And I'll share those links below, as well as that dehypnosis election, which is just a practice of the process of going through the dehypnosis, because we get so bombarded, if you're at all following politics, especially. And you get bombarded with other people's views and opinions about what's right, what's wrong, which way we should go, and a lot of skepticism. But the quizzical, getting back to the child and to the attitude I want to pass forward today as a part of our dehypnosis, is to not just conform. So I am going to put out the view, here I go, starting the smorgasbord, that our first important thing to focus on is employment. And I don't know anybody hardly in my life, you may not, as well, who is not interested in being employed. So my first priority for everyone is to continue to seek, to fight for, to gain respect and the right to be employed. How you define that employment is up to you. But I do know fundamentally all human beings, from the moment we're born, sort of thing, until we die, we want to be employed meaningfully. We want to be making sense of a world and an experience of this life, which is so short and precious for us all, to then express, contribute one way or another to this cause or that cause, this left, this right, this center, and to basically bring that about, which is our manifestation of our cause, our purpose, our meaning for being here. So that's how I start. And I would like that to be a meditation for every day. I'm suggesting that for all people on the planet in this post-November 5th. And I'm going to get down to why it is so dangerous of a time that we're in. And it's so opportunistic in this good sense of what we can do about it and be creative and innovative, as I said. I'm going to therefore start with employment. And then you're going to see I'm going to create a little bit of a model here. Once I employ that model of employment at the base of change and transformation, then I'm basically looking at every other human being I encounter, no matter, again, what they look like, what their status is, whether I'm prejudiced against them or not because of culture, gender, sex, class, whatever it might be, their politics, etc., or I just don't like the way they behave. My first goal is to see them as somebody working hard in their own way. Not like always like how I think is hard, working hard, but they want to be employed. And therefore to think, how can we as a society, or me and my group of companions, friends, allies, adjust our thinking and perception to understand everyone wants to be employed. And employed is, as I said, about a lot of things, but it's ultimately about recognition. Yeah, see, if somebody doesn't recognize me as a human being or recognize that I am of some worth, in that I have the right and due access to basic employment. Again, you define what employment means. If you don't have that recognition, you'll never have a society. You'll never have a satisfaction at a very deep level. And that means for even the child who wants to be employed in the home, when you watch them wanting to copy and clean up the house or make it messy or follow what mom and dad are doing and start pretending cooking, playing nurse. The very earliest ages, children are already wanting to be employed. And if that employed is just even to act, to connect with another, to connect with their environment and manipulate the environment in a way that's creative for them, that's employment. They're employed and they're being supported ultimately, hopefully not being hurt in their employment. Okay, enough on employing and the perceptual lens that we need to put on in this November 5th era, ongoing into a very dangerous future, as I said. Once you have employment, then you can grow that. So the next lens to put on as we're developing this model, I'm developing this model for you, is to put on the lens of civic employment and deployment. So what does that mean? Civic means something to do with the polis, which is the political world, which means the world of my others, my neighbors, of all kinds. That's me participating in the social sphere. I cannot not be in the social sphere. The moment you're born, you're in a social sphere because you're conceived, because you're now you and your mom in the womb. You see, we are social creatures. So that's why employment is so important. And then the civic is about that social engagement. And whether you're living rurally or in the wilds, or whether you're living in an urban center, doesn't matter. All humans are civic. And that leads to the next idea of deployment. So I said civic deployment because we have to move in a very powerful and quick way with this new lens to civic deployment, meaning I will do my best to make sure that I am working to be part of the social fabric of the world in that very diverse, as it is, even conflictual, lots of difference, but I still am working that everybody has a right to be civically deployed. In other words, building some kind of social fabric. Now, I may not agree with how they're building the social fabric, and they may not agree with how I'm building the social fabric. But what I do know with, and they know with this lens, is we're all building the social fabric because we are civic characters. We're civic participants, and we're deploying our civicness, is what I'm saying with this second part of my model, to become social. And why are we doing that? For the better good of the social. And you could say the better good of life, the better good of recognition, employment, etc., etc. Won't go into all those fine details. The model will get very boring if I keep repeating all that. So let's move to the next, which starts getting more interesting to me, and that is moving from civic deployment and that lens. We move to the next lens, which is citizenship. And that's something like you earn. Now, you are a citizen because you're born in a country. That's kind of the way it works in all countries that I know around the world, more or less. You are a member from that land, from that tribe, right? From a place. And that gives you not just civicness, it gives you citizenship. Very powerful, and that just in a more complicated form of the civic. And so citizenship is a right of everyone. And how we define it, we're going to have our differences. How we work that out in the political sphere, in the cultural sphere, and in our mental and conscious awareness and our emotional way of being in the world, supporting everyone's citizenship in some way. And that's a complex set of definitions and defining and negotiations of how to create citizenship for everybody. So the other part of citizenship, what I find so interesting, and I think it's very important, is that you have to earn it. It's a given access point for you in your life, in all beings, as I'm saying. But to actually produce good citizenship is a requirement. To be a good driver. So you deserve to drive a car, for example. Drive on the public streets. You deserve to sell your products on the street, but you have to get a license. And that license process, the reason it's there is so that you have certain ethical and responsible commitments to the civic and the citizenship privileges. And just like when you have to get married, you have to get a license. You have to more or less get through some kind of training if you really want to educate yourself on how to have a a marriage that will last. Now, some people don't do that and they don't think they need to do that, and that's possibly true. But I like the idea of having to get a license because I like the idea of learning and putting that together with accomplishment when you actually get your license and you go, yes, I got it, I made it. See, it's an initiation as from the civic to the citizenship. So citizenship education, therefore, is something that's been around in a lot of societies. It has kind of lost favor and disappeared almost virtually in much of our curriculum in education. And I'm saying, no, it's got to come back big time. Again, regardless of your politics in your particular biases or prejudices or just flavors of what you like and others don't like. It's fine. There'll always be that. But citizenship is fundamental. So, okay, I'm putting on a third lens was that one. And then the next lens is more complicated and a bigger jump to make that most people don't, and they don't even talk about it. I do because that's what I do. And that's to fearless ship. Now, a lot of people saying we're on the spaceship Earth. Once we all realize we're on one blue big planet out there floating in space and a lot of darkness, and we don't know that there's life on any other planet, and we realize we're on this one spaceship. So this comes out of the 70s and 80s, especially when we got our first pictures from space, somewhere in the early 80s, or I think it was earlier than that. And we got our first picture of our blue planet, and we're all on that ship. And we're all one. And so we thought that that would be, a lot of us, myself included, oh, that would be such a powerful vision. Those first photographs of the planet from a spaceship. And we now got to see ourselves as one whole ship, right, floating in this great sea. That we would work together and cooperate more in a civic way. Well, yeah, maybe it helps some. Others, it doesn't mean anything. That's what I've learned over the last 40 years. And so we got to move to another idea. And I think the fearless ship is the one that I'm going to focus on as we move into this post-November 5th. Very deeply troubling time for sure. Dangerous time, as I've said, with all the crises of all kinds. And then again, some people are not going to believe there's a crisis here or there. They don't even think there's a crisis, some people. But that aside, I'm convinced of my lifetime, there's a lot of crises and they're hitting us pretty hard. Globally, collectively, small groups, small places, and in personal lives. So the fearless ship idea, won't be able to go into fine detail, but just to give you the sense of that lens, is basically that it says no one deserves to live in fear for very long. In other words, no one deserves to live in fear chronically. No one ought to, simple language, be distressed in fear and being bombarded by fear regularly, irregularly, but over and over and over chronically, and not being allowed to recover, heal, and get back to a normal homeostasis. Every human deserves to get back to a homeostasis. So, yeah, we're not going to be able to avoid fearful experiences and traumas and threats that exist. No. But the fearlessness ship says, but nobody deserves to be in fear for very long. So we work toward that, right? We use our civics, we use our citizenship, we use our fearless ship lens. And that means seeing everyone as having that right to not have to live and be in fear. And how can we help that in one way or another as being on this fearless ship that we're all on together? Because we're all going to be on the ship of fear. The planet, where it's going, where humanity's going, where all these crises are leading us. So won't go too much further than that, but you can check out my work further on In Search of Fearlessness project what that means, why that lens has developed over the last almost 35 years. And it gets very complicated in theory and practice, but nonetheless, just a simple idea of putting the lens on like these other lenses I'm speaking to this morning. The idea is to basically everyone deserves, and I want to work toward, is protecting people's as citizens and protecting them from things like all the forces that bring about this fear and intimidation and domination. That just is human. Anyone can do that. You can be right wing, you can be left wing, you can be centrist, and still work toward that aim. And that is because there's a great joy to live when you're not in fear and intimidation, in domination. It's pretty fundamental, isn't it? Just in search of fearlessness, the Fearlessness Project. That's an employment. That's a deployment. That's a aim. That is essential. So that's the way I've languaged things. And there might be other words that you prefer and like better than that. Now, some people say, well, we ought to all have hope. That's kind of, fundamental to all humans, is they ought to have a life that they can still hope and dream and have promises. And so I don't use that language for various reasons. I mean, much more complex conversation. I tend to use the fearlessness approach first, and I think it will well replace the need for hope. But you'll get ultimately a sort of same kind of liberated, joyful outcome from it, as well as a lot of hard work to travel this path of fearlessness is not easy. But anything good that's the reward at the end will come because you've done hard work and it's really worth it. And you get there, you go, yes, that was worth all that good work. So we need to do the tough work. We need to go through that, in a sense, darkness before we get to the light of, the reward, if you want to call it the promise. But I'm not promising you anything here today because I just know that we're ready for these kinds of changes, these new lenses. So I want to say on the smorgasbord next, all those lenses is I want you to realize is that politics is not everything. It's very easy to become obsessed by politics and addicted to politics in all kinds of ways. And people from, again, left, right, center, it doesn't matter. You can get really obsessed by it and you can get very intimidated by it to the point where you think you don't want to be involved in politics, period. I hear that from a lot of people. A lot of young people saying that. And they have all kinds of reasons why they don't want to get involved. And that's fine. They can have their reason. I'm saying is that politics is essential to the cultural sphere. There's two other spheres, however, and that's the natural sphere and the spiritual sphere. They are not the same. They are related to the cultural sphere. And the cultural sphere is the political world, politics per se. But just the idea of the civic, the polis, the social, that's in the cultural sphere. That is a big part, huge part of the cultural sphere. Not the only part. We also have arts and sciences and so on, cultural spheres. But let's just remember, so I call it, remember your NCS, the natural world, the cultural world, and the spiritual world, and they're all revolving around a kind of way of being and making sense and living in the world. I want to draw from and be connected to all three of those realms. Again, much longer conversation, and I would theorize and philosophize about how to approach those domains, overlapping, as I said, influence each other, but they all are quite distinct. Therefore, the political realm, it gets, to me, packaged, it gets held in a container that's not totally infiltrating the natural world or infiltrating all of what the spiritual world is about. Okay, so NCS is another part on my smorgasbord this morning. Simply the words, politics is not everything, period. The internet, technology, is essential in this post-November 5th era, as I'm calling it. Probably, to me, 10 times more powerful than the post-9/11 era, what happened and has happening, post-COVID era, November 5th era. You can see what I'm doing historically, marking these cultural evolutionary changes, very potent and influencing everything. These kinds of changes, technology being the one. But it doesn't influence everything. Leave it at that. But technology influences near everything, put it that way. And I can tell right when I get onto my Zoom call today, for example, let me give a few examples of AI and why artificial intelligence is part of just technology that's been around for a long time, hundreds of years, if not thousands, and simple technologies, and where it's going, because it's also leading us in a way. So there's almost a natural, cultural, spiritual, technological sphere. I sometimes have given it the fourth dimension on those three big spheres of influence and reality. But I go on the internet today and I see immediately as I get on my Zoom channel here, I'm getting a new flashing light. Um, and it says, sign up here. What does it say? There's a special document. Yeah. Um, introducing Zoom Docs, it says, for AI first collaboration. So it's asking me to sign up to something in Zoom. Somebody's programmed, you know, a more easy, fluid way to use Zoom and with the information that's being passed on Zoom and recorded, or not recorded, but AI is going to now be part of all of that. It's going to be tapping us. It's going to be our collaborator. And I look and I go, well, I don't even want to touch that button for so many reasons because it's like, why do I want to join with AI? And why do I want to join with a technology this is already complex enough that I don't understand how it works and the design behind Zoom and all the connections that it has that influence all kinds of passing on of information to who and how and why and making money. I can appreciate the technology to a point, and then I go, well, that's a point I feel like I'm being pushed into. And I have no doubt that's exactly what's going to happen. It's just like when the cameras kept changing design or cars or whatever. And now we've got engines that we don't know how to fix. We've got cameras that are so complicated and they keep changing the technology. So you have to get rid of your old camera to buy a new one. Well, this is what's happening with technology, right? On digital. And everybody knows that. You have to upgrade your package now because we've redesigned what the platform that you just got onto or purchased, but now you're out of date. Yeah, so that's one of my pet peeves is being pushed around by technology. And of course, it's people making money off of those technology advances. That's fine, but they're technocrats and they're moving technology in ways that force humans to do things. And so I'm about not forcing, not manipulating human beings. That's the talk today. I've given you some lenses of how to avoid being manipulated, how to empower yourself to be civic citizen, fearlessship, participants, agents, empowered individually and collectively, as much as we do that with each other. And so any kind of manipulation like that. So to me, this is another manipulation showing this up here. And I have to sign up to AI. And then I see on the bottom of the Zoom, they've added now AI companion. You can click on there and do something. I know students are coming to me in graduate school, but it's also happening in ordinary schools. And they want to do an assignment and they're going, I'm going to ask AI. I kid you not. I hear this, today. And I just go, I don't say anything, but it's like, there's a lot out there to ask. Why are you asking AI? Okay, at some point you may ask AI. At some point I may ask AI. I'm not making it wrong or but right. I'm just saying it is manipulative and it's being sold to us and manipulated, just like everything else. So ultimately, we just have to decide, do I want to be manipulated a little bit and go along that far or not? Or sometimes just say, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not joining anything with AI with me that I know of. But of course, even then, it will be impossible eventually to avoid it, and it probably already is. AI, in other words, those systems, the World Wide Web, has its hands in everything. Now, let's put something more affective and emotional, motivational, related to this idea of the internet. So this is the little piece I'm sharing today as part of all this smorgasbord of post-November 5th adaptations, if you will, intelligence, how to be intelligent and where we're going. And World Wide Web is an interesting term. Somebody uses, or starting to use a term in the ecological movement, is the World Wood Web, the World Wood Web. And that means how wood, trees, roots, plants, and all the mycelium, microbiology, the fungi, connectors. There's a huge network that connects everything with everything underground. And now we're seeing the research for this connections. In other words, the World Wood Web has been going on forever on this planet as long as there was life manifesting to a point where it could operate. And those fungi could operate and work together with plants as this massive connective system. And of course, digital has done the same thing in the virtual world, this unreal world that I'm in right now with you, more or less unreal. Okay, so keeping in mind the World Wide Web, WWW, is not everything. It is not the most powerful or the most magnificent or amazing web of existence. It's not. It's very minor, but on the planet Earth, in our lives today, the contemporary world, it is very potent. Leave that there. And then a quote that came up I saw the other day on one of the YouTubes as I'm checking a YouTube, and then the algorithms throw up another, oh, you might like this, right? So this is again manipulation. You might like this, might like this. Sometimes I like it because they do give me good things that I like, but not most of the time. But the one that came up with had a really interesting title, and I just jotted it down. The internet, quoting, the internet is a machine that destroys trust. End quote. I don't know who that was by, but it was just the title of a YouTube, and that's enough for me. Because I'm a fearologist, trust and fear are like opposites. And if you've got trust, you're not going to have a lot of fear. If you've got a lot of fear, you're not going to have a lot of trust. Just as a general rule, that's a general principle. There's some nuancing in that. But I put that out to you as a basic principle of this new world we're going into. And so, post November 5th, if you're going into a world constantly being impacted by the internet and you spend a lot of your time, if not too much time, for you to decide on the internet. And I will certainly decide if I had children, grandchildren. Every parent has to decide how much they're going to let their children on the internet. Keep that in mind, that quote. I'll read it again. The internet, and I think it's just so true, the internet is a machine that devours trust. Not only that, it sucks energy and attention like a vacuum cleaner, constantly sucking that from us as living beings. I said it's a machine. Yes, there's humans behind the machine and the design, but the ultimate movement, the process is a machine. It's a tool, and the tool is using us. We're not just using the tool. That's the basic principle. And that goes back for a lot of thinkers, critical thinkers, researchers show is that the medium is the message. Marshall McLuhan, the tool becomes eventually controlling you. The robot becomes eventually controlling you, even though it was yours to control and you paid for it. It eventually changes and transforms your life in its directions. And some will be your own directions, but a lot of it's machine direction. So the internet, World Wide Web, see what I'm saying? And the reason I bring that up is because I do want to read to you a quote as well as I end this video. You can see I'm also talking about a quizzical skepticism that we ought to teach our children, we ought to teach ourselves and teach each other. A quizzical skepticism that challenges everything, especially in the world we're going into. So I just use November 5th as a kind of turning point for the new era of a healthy, quizzical skepticism of everything that comes, every bit of information, because AI is now already and will continue to create false realities, false information for manipulation. And people who have the most money and big corporate structures, including in government, corporate governments, they will produce the information to get you to vote for them. They will get produce information that will make you pay for this or buy that or sacrifice this or that, including your life, your children's life, because those AI virtual reality that we so depend on will be a complete manipulative machine. It's getting there now, and it's getting there more and more, and we will not be able to stop it. That's my argument, and several other critical thinkers who think a lot about technology and where it's going in the future. So be prepared. It's like be prepared for what we're going into, be prepared for how much you want to use technologies of these kinds, AI, etc. Let me read the quote, and I think I'll end with that. Thanks for tuning in. We'll have more discussions. It's like I'm just really talking about protection, just like when the young children at the daycare center where I work at times, they have to put on sunscreen at the beginning of every day. They play outside most of the day. That's why. Kindergarten, right? Preschool. Why are they putting on sunscreen? Because of the UV light is too strong now. Even though it's a natural light and it's essential to life, it has become pollutant if you get too much of it. And one of the reasons is because, of course, pollution has changed the filtering through high carbon dioxide and loss of ozone layers above the planet, where the UV light coming through now causes cancer if you get too much of it on the skin and other ways. It's damaging. And we know sunlight can deteriorate anything if you get too much of it. So you have to put on the sunscreen, right? That's the prophylactic, that's the protective layer. And then we can go out and play. And I'm basically saying you can still go out and play and have fun. Talking to every human now, best you can. Some are, of course, suffering under really horrible conditions more than others. But as you and we work toward putting on these new lenses, changing our society in a positive way, and empowering ourselves to do so, we also have to put on our protective shields. I'm wearing a shield today that I designed in 1989 for the In Search of Fearlessness project. You will also have to find your sunscreen shields in some kind of way. It's a metaphor, right? To put on your shield to protect you from the internet, for example, the machine that's constantly devouring trust. And that devouring trust is basically it's creating more fear. And that's not the world I want to live in. I do not think any human being wants to live in that world because I am convinced every human being does not want to live in fear too long. That's the fearlessness principle. That's how the fearless ship can work when we work together to make that happen. The quote I'm reading is from Layman Pascal, a futurist, a very powerful meta-integral thinker, and I've done a few talks with him on his YouTube station, podcast system, and I really respect his thinking a lot. I don't agree with him on everything. I also just really appreciate the kind of people he's collecting around himself to think about the future in these new ways, especially in a post-November 5th way. And not left, not right, not just those kinds of categories. There's a much more complex way to understand what those categories can mean. They mean something, but they are changing, and that's something he talks a lot about as the people he connects with, as myself. It's much more complex than left-right politics going on today that's influencing the world. But here's his quote for the future. I think it's a good one, and it's all about, again, how do we adapt to and build collective intelligence, individual intelligence, ongoing. I've offered you some lenses of how to do that, and here's his conclusion about, and I'll put a link to the talk that he gives us on, etc. And he gives it at the 1:30:10 mark in a talk with a group of people, young people and others, elders, talking about the future. He says, you have to find a way to absorb, heal, and transfigure this, because it's not just going to be this election. The next election is going to be fucked up and crazy, and the one after that too. So it's not a matter of digging in your heels in resistance to this election result and what's happening. Follow it. You have to figure out a way to work well with every kind of dangerous nonsense, because that is what it takes to start building the future together. Because every kind of nonsense is going to be coming down the pipeline forever. End of quote. Any common language, he says, we have to be able to surf all those tsunamis, all those crises, everything coming to us, to be that surfer. And that's what I do. I provide tools of thinking, educational processes, organizational processes to, as a fearologist, I consult to anyone who's interested to help us surf those tsunamis and that kind of future. I think it's very accurate what he said. There is no getting better and normal, back to normal. That's the role of where you have to be incredibly innovative, creative, where I started this talk. And I'm not just talking about ordinary creativity and innovation. You have to be able to know how to build shields, protection, prophylactics from these great forces. And you have to be really clever at getting your information and checking out multiple perspectives on your information that you're gathering, and be quizzically skeptical of absolutely everything. So Layman Pascal also says, that's how I talk to children. He says, when I talk to children in my world, around me, real children, I tell them, be quizzically skeptical of everything everybody tells you. And then he says, well, I'll define that. Quizzical skepticism means, it's kind of critical thinking, another way to say it. Quizzical means to, basically, I think he puts it in the idea of, I'm paraphrasing, the child's saying to the person sharing the information, particularly, let's call it an adult, could be a teacher, could be a minister, right? Could be anybody, police officer, whatever. And the child in their mind, in their attitude, they have to be supported and trained to be able to do this well and master it as a skill. Is they're basically saying, okay, I'm listening to you. However, I don't necessarily believe anything you said until I make my own decision about whether to believe it or not. But I will listen to you to a point, reasonable. I will listen to you, and I will not emotionally withdraw from you. I paraphrased there. Like Pascal. Very interesting, isn't it? Mm-hmm. It's kind of what I call the no, the inherent essential rebel no. In other words, don't manipulate me or don't try to. I know you will try to. But the idea is, the essential no is, don't try to manipulate me with your information, your knowledge, your knowing. Share it, but I'm quizzically skeptical all the way. but I will not withdraw from you just because I'm quizzically skeptical. Huge difference there. That's the essential rebel. The one that withdraws emotionally, once we move into that patterning, that's the twisted rebel. And a lot of normal rebels get twisted because of that, and even twisted rebels can fall back and fall into that category. But that's my rebel theory. That's on other videos, other conversations. So put down your queries, your quizzical skepticism of this video. Be quizzical and be skeptical of everything I've said today. And let's have a conversation about that skepticism in a good, healthy way of non emotional withdrawal from the engagement of civics, of citizenship, and riding the waves as fearlessship. A new kind of leadership, right? Fearlessship. See you in the future.